If you drive in the United States, especially if you're over 65, there's something you need to hear now. Three key driving rules are changing quietly across the country, and most people won't realize it until it's already causing them problems. This isn't rumor or guesswork. These changes are already active in several states, and they're designed in a way that can catch even careful, law-abiding drivers completely off guard. One missed detail, one overlooked notice, or one small assumption could suddenly affect your license, your insurance, or even whether you're legally allowed to drive at all. And here's what really matters. One of these rules is already costing drivers money and mobility before they even understand what they did wrong. That's why you need to stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what's changing, who's most affected, and what you can do right now to protect yourself before you're forced to deal with the consequences. This matters more than ever because the way driving laws are enforced in the US is changing. For decades, drivers were used to a system that relied heavily on human judgment. If something went wrong, there was often a warning, a grace period, or at least a chance to explain. That era is fading. State DMVs and transportation departments are shifting toward automated systems, real-time monitoring, and stricter enforcement policies that leave very little room for error. And these changes don't just affect reckless drivers or people with a long list of tickets. They affect ordinary drivers, retirees, commuters, parents, grandparents, people who have been driving safely for decades and believe they're doing everything right. The problem is that the rules are shifting under their feet. Across multiple states, new regulations are being introduced under the banner of public safety. On paper, the goals sound reasonable. Fewer accidents, fewer uninsured drivers, less distracted driving. In practice, the way these rules are enforced can feel sudden, unforgiving, and confusing if you're not prepared. Notices are delivered digitally. Databases update instantly. Penalties trigger automatically. In many cases, by the time a driver realizes something has changed, the system has already flagged them. That's why awareness isn't optional anymore. It's essential. This isn't about panic. It's about information. When you understand the rules in advance, you stay in control. When you know what the DMV is checking, you can prepare. The drivers who run into trouble aren't usually careless. They're uninformed. They assume renewal works the same as always. They assume a one-day insurance lapse won't matter. They assume glancing at a phone at a red light is harmless. Those assumptions are exactly what these new rules are targeting. What we're seeing is a coordinated, gradual shift. A rule appears in one state, then another, then quietly spreads. Some people hear about it early, most don't. Seniors are often hit first, not because they're bad drivers, but because they're subject to new requirements that didn't exist before. That's why this update deserves your attention whether you're 25 or 75. The ripple effects don't stop at one age group. Over the next part of this video, I'm going to walk you through these 3 new driving rules step by step. I'll explain what changed, why states are doing this, and how people are getting caught off guard. More importantly, I'll show you what you can do now to stay compliant, avoid fines, and protect your ability to drive. Some of this may surprise you. Some of it may challenge what you thought you knew about driving laws. But all of it is information you'll want before your next renewal notice, insurance payment, or everyday trip turns into a problem you never saw coming. And keep this in mind as we go. None of these rules exist in isolation. Together, they reflect a new mindset at DMVs, a move from occasional checks to constant verification. Once you understand that pattern, the rest becomes much easier to make sense of. And that starts with the first rule, which is already affecting millions of older drivers, often without warning. The first major change you need to know about is mandatory vision retesting for drivers over 65. This is where many people are being caught completely by surprise. For years, renewing a license was simple. A form in the mail, a quick online renewal or drop-off, maybe a new photo once in a while, and that was it. In several states, that's no longer the case. If you are 65 or older and your license is coming up for renewal, you may no longer be eligible to renew online or by mail. Instead, you may be required to appear in person at a DMV office and pass a vision screening before your renewal is approved. For many drivers, they only discover this when they try to renew online and the system suddenly tells them they must come in person. Others show up expecting a quick renewal and end up facing unexpected restrictions, delays, or instructions to see an eye doctor before they can drive again. The reasoning behind this is safety data. As people age, vision issues become more common, even when someone feels like they see well enough. Conditions like cataracts, glaucoma, and macular degeneration often develop slowly. Many people adapt to changes without noticing how much their vision has declined, especially in low light at night or around the edges of their field of view. From the DMV's perspective, vision is one of the most critical parts of safe driving, and they are no longer comfortable relying only on self-reporting. Now, put yourself in this situation. You've been driving for 40 or 50 years without a serious incident. You know the roads, the signs, the local traffic. Driving represents independence, getting to the store, the doctor, friends, family, social activities. You walk into the DMV expecting a 5-minute renewal and are suddenly asked to read a vision chart you haven't seen in years. You struggle with a few lines. The examiner tells you your vision doesn't meet the standard for an unrestricted license. In that moment, you're not just renewing. You're confronting the possibility of limits on your driving or extra medical steps. For many, that's a shock. Not because they're reckless, but because no one prepared them for this change. It's also important to be clear about what difficulty with a vision test usually means. In most cases, it doesn't mean your license is immediately taken away. Often it leads to conditions or extra requirements. You might be required to wear glasses or contacts while driving. You might be restricted to daylight driving only. You may be asked to see an eye specialist to determine whether your vision can be corrected sufficiently. The real issue isn't that the rule exists, it's that it arrives as a surprise. Drivers who plan for this ahead of time usually have a much easier experience. Those who walk in unprepared feel blindsided. That's why preparation is everything with this first rule. If you're over 65 and you know your license will be up for renewal within the next year, the smartest move is to see an eye doctor before the DMV tells you to. Make sure your prescription is current. If you need new lenses, update them on your own schedule, not at the last minute under DMV pressure. If you already know you have vision concerns, talk honestly with your eye doctor about driving. That conversation is far less stressful in a medical setting than at a government counter. When you arrive at the DMV having already addressed your vision, you're in control instead of caught off guard. While this first rule mainly affects older drivers, the second one affects everyone, and it's spreading fast. It deals with car insurance, and the way the DMV now verifies coverage leaves almost no margin for error. For a long time, insurance enforcement was reactive. If you were pulled over, you were asked for proof. If you had an accident, your coverage was checked. If your policy quietly lapsed, you might not feel the consequences right away. That's not how it works anymore, in many states. Real-time insurance verification is now tied directly into DMV systems. The moment your coverage lapses, the system knows. Here's the basic idea. Insurance companies now send frequent electronic updates about whether policies are active or inactive. If your policy expires, is canceled, or lapses for any reason, that update goes to the DMV's database almost immediately. There's no waiting period. There's no human manually checking your situation. The system simply marks your vehicle as uninsured. Depending on where you live, that can automatically lead to a suspended registration, fines that easily reach into the hundreds of dollars, and in some places, even suspension of your driver's license. All of this can happen without a single traffic stop or documented accident. The really dangerous part is how easy it can be to end up with a lapse, a missed payment, an expired credit card, a bank issue, changing insurance companies and assuming coverage overlaps when it doesn't. Even a one-day gap can be enough to trigger an automatic response. A lot of drivers don't realize anything is wrong until they receive an official notice, or worse, until they discover that their registration is suspended and they've been unknowingly driving illegally. By then, fixing things isn't as simple as paying your premium. You may have to pay reinstatement fees, provide proof of coverage, and wait for the system to update. This enforcement doesn't care what your intent was. It doesn't care that you forgot, were busy, or believed you had coverage. From the system's point of view, your policy is active or it isn't. Because this is now automated, it usually moves faster than people expect. That's why staying insured isn't just, I pay my bill. It now includes actively confirming that your coverage is live. Autopay helps, but if your card expires or your bank information changes, autopay can fail. After any renewal or change of insurer, you should double-check that the policy start and end dates line up and that there is no gap. As strict as this feels, it's part of the same enforcement pattern, and the third rule applies that pattern directly to how you behave behind the wheel, especially with your phone. The third rule is where many drivers are getting the harshest surprise, because it changes not just the penalties for distracted driving, but how it's defined and enforced. For a long time, most people thought of distracted driving as one thing: texting while driving. If you weren't physically typing a message, you probably thought you were safe. That assumption no longer holds. In several states, distracted driving laws have been broadened so much that behaviors many drivers thought were harmless are now violations with serious consequences. And enforcement is no longer limited to an officer seeing you hold your phone. Under these expanded laws, distracted driving is defined very aggressively. It doesn't only include typing texts or holding a phone to your ear. It can include looking down at your phone, scrolling music, checking notifications, tapping your navigation app, or glancing at your screen while stopped at a red light. In some states, the law applies even if your car isn't moving. If the engine is on and you're interacting with your phone in a way an officer views as distracting, that can be enough for a citation. The penalties are designed to reflect how serious states consider this issue. First offenses that once led to modest fines can now cost several $100s and add points to your record. Repeat offenses can lead to much higher fines, mandatory safe driving classes, and even license suspension. On top of that, one distracted driving mark on your record can raise your insurance premiums for years. What makes this rule especially powerful is the new technology being used to enforce it. Some law enforcement agencies are using advanced detection systems that rely on high-resolution cameras and AI to identify when drivers are looking down, holding devices, or making hand movements that match phone use. These systems may be mounted on patrol vehicles or placed along roads and intersections, similar to speed or red light cameras. In some places, this enforcement is moving toward automated citations. That means you might not even realize you've been caught until a ticket shows up in your mail. No conversation at the roadside, no chance to say you were stopped or just checking a map. The system records what you did and issues a citation. Again, the same pattern appears. Behavior is recorded, not intent. A few seconds looking at your screen can be enough, regardless of why you did it. Careful drivers often get trapped here because they don't think of themselves as distracted drivers. They don't text and drive at high speeds. They don't watch videos while driving, but they do glance at their phone when it buzzes. They do reroute their GPS when traffic appears. They do check a message while stopped at a light. Under the new laws, those moments can count as violations. Imagine you're at a red light. Your phone vibrates in the cup holder. You pick it up, glance to see who it is, and put it down. A nearby camera or officer sees that moment. The light turns green, you drive on, unaware that in the eyes of the law, that was a ticketable offense. Days later, you receive a notice. The chance to explain is gone. The system has already made the decision. The safest way to live with these rules is to cut the risk at the root. Your phone should be out of your reach and out of your sight while you're driving. Not in your hand, not in your lap, not where notifications are visible. If you need navigation, set your route before you leave, and don't touch the device again while driving. If you need to respond to a call or message, pull over completely to a safe place. Even hands-free systems have limits. What's allowed can depend on your state's law and exactly how you use them. Again, the goal isn't just to avoid fines. It's to avoid creating any situation where a human officer or automated system can reasonably label your behavior as distracted. Now step back and look at all three changes together. Mandatory vision testing for seniors, Real-time insurance verification for all drivers and aggressive distracted driving enforcement may seem like separate rules, but they're all driven by the same idea. States are moving away from occasional enforcement and toward constant verification. Instead of assuming you are in compliance unless something goes wrong, the system now expects proof at all times. Your eyesight is checked more frequently. Your insurance is monitored in real time. Your phone use and focus on the road are watched more closely, often with technology. In the past, many consequences came only after an event, an accident, a traffic stop, a visible violation. Now, consequences can happen with no crash, no stop, no obvious incident at all. A brief insurance gap, a failed vision screen, or a quick glance at your phone can all trigger action. This system is meant to catch risks earlier, but it also demands more awareness and responsibility from you as a driver. For many, especially older drivers, this feels abrupt and harsh. It can feel like experience is no longer valued, and the rules keep tightening. It forces people to change habits they've had for years. But understanding the pattern actually puts power back in your hands. Once you accept that enforcement is continuous and mostly automated, you can adapt. You can check your insurance status regularly, prepare for license renewals months ahead of time, change how and where you keep your phone when you drive. These are not huge life changes. They're small adjustments that bring your habits in line with how the system now works. The drivers who are hit hardest by these new rules aren't irresponsible. They're the ones who assume nothing has changed. The ones who do best are those who notice the shift and adjust early. So the question becomes, how do you adapt in a way that protects your freedom to drive, your finances, and your peace of mind? The answer is to move from reactive to proactive. Instead of waiting for a notice, you build simple routines that keep you compliant without constant worry. For example, treat an annual eye exam as part of your driving responsibility from age 65 onward, instead of waiting for the DMV to force the issue. Put a reminder on your calendar each month to quickly confirm that your insurance is active and paid. Decide once, right now, that your phone stays completely out of your hands anytime the engine is on. These small decisions give you control. They reduce surprises. For senior drivers in particular, they can actually help preserve independence rather than take it away. There's a common fear that all of these new rules are designed to quietly remove older drivers from the road. In reality, meeting the standards proactively can demonstrate that you are safe and compliant, which makes it harder for anyone to argue otherwise. Having current vision records, clean insurance history, and no distracted driving citations builds a strong case that you're operating well within the law. At the same time, it's wise to remember that these driving changes don't sit in isolation. Losing a license or having a registration suspended doesn't just affect how you get around. It can affect medical visits, social interactions, caring for loved ones, and even mental health. Higher insurance premiums can strain a budget for years after a single mistake. Taking these rules seriously is not about living in fear. It's about protecting your quality of life. So let's summarize the practical steps. If you're 65 or older, assume an in-person renewal and vision test are coming. Schedule your own eye exam early and be prepared. Treat car insurance as something you actively manage. Use autopay if you like, but also verify that payments go through and policies don't lapse, especially when switching providers. Remove distractions from your driving environment. Put your phone where you can't reach it or see it. Use navigation only when set beforehand, and pull over for any interaction you truly need. These aren't extreme measures. They're realistic responses to how driving is regulated now. And remember this, these changes are not likely to go away. When one state's approach works, others copy it. Enforcement models that reduce accidents or increase compliance tend to spread nationwide over time. That means keeping yourself informed has become part of being a responsible driver. Laws can change quietly, but the impact on your life is loud when they do. If this explanation helped you understand what's changing and how to adjust your habits, consider sharing it with someone you care about, especially a parent, a grandparent, or any regular driver who might not realize these rules are already being enforced. And if you want to stay ahead of future DMV changes, driving law updates, and policies that affect your day-to-day life on the road, make sure you're subscribed and watching for new videos. I'll keep bringing you clear, straightforward breakdowns so you're never blindsided by a rule you didn't know existed. Thank you for spending this time with me. Drive safely, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next update.